Meeting August 5th, 2024. I want to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We do have an agenda, and the question was, I have that, but I see Mr. Boxley in the room. I thought he might have something to say to us, or at some time. I mean, not necessarily right now, huh? Not right now. I'm just saying, do we need to do that as an agenda item, or can you do that in some other part of the agenda? Okay. So we do have an agenda. If there's no other changes, I will ask for a motion to approve the revised agenda.
So move.
Mr. Simmons has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I think I heard Ms. Wright first, so Joyce Wright has seconded. All those in favor, just raise your hand. That's unanimous. Okay, we have some minutes from May 6th and July 1st. Hopefully you all had a chance to read back through those. Do you have any corrections or questions? I would like to go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the minutes from May 6th, 2024 and July 1st, 2024.
A motion to approve.
Is that Joyce again?
Yeah.
Thank you, Joyce. Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Campbell has second. All those in favor, just by raising your hands, that's unanimous. Okay. Joyce, I'm glad you're with us. Thank you for making the effort to be online and staying safe, because I know you had to travel a little bit. And for those the rest of us who had to come those 4 or 5 miles, thank you for being so brave. All right, the next item we have on our agenda is the staff reports. General staff updates, Historic Neighborhood Permitting and Design Studio, Home Safety and Repair Program, and the Sewer Connection Program. And I'm assuming that this might be the section at the end where we can ask Mr. Boxer to give us a little update. Okay. We'll start with the general staff updates, LMO districts. Is that who we're waiting for?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. We can go to another item. Oh, you can take care of it?
Oh, yeah, is this? Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon. We are very excited to be here with you. Thank you for coming out and braving the weather. Even more excited about sharing updates on the LMO and Districts project. I'm Shay Farrar, a principal planner in the Community Planning Division, and I'll ask Alexis McAwee if she wants to come up and join me, where we have updates now for you on the districts as well as the LMO projects. A lot of work has been taking place behind the scenes, and we are getting ready to bring that work forward publicly. So we're very excited to get to that point and to bring you updates moving forward at each of your meetings as the project continues to evolve. I'll hand it over to Alexis to present updates on the LMO project, which is really the districts feeds into that. So I'll let her take the lead.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Nice
Alexis.
to see you.
Good to see
It's
you.
been a minute. Principal planner for the record. Update on the LMO project. We have 2 LMO initiatives happening side by side. So we have the LMO priority amendments, which is a set of 12 different amendments that you're going to see coming forward. These are priority changes to address things that have been lingering in the LMO in front of the overhaul. And then we have the LMO overhaul, which is looking at, of course, the entire LMO in every single chapter and looking at all of our ordinances. That project really kicked off at the beginning of June. And right now we are working with the consulting team on an engagement plan, the details of an engagement plan. So the details of that will include bringing information in front of our public boards and public committees. So you guys are one of those public committees that we will be coming in front of, and probably also scheduling some stakeholder committees for certain chapters of the LMO that will have specific topics, whether it's short-term rentals or family compounds, specific subject areas, we'll probably have stakeholder committees for that as well. But that's where we are right now with the LMO. If you want to jump into districts.
Yeah, so the district's project has really been streamlined to align with the LMO overhaul in particular. It will feed recommendations for the 7 additional districts. If you recall, back in 2022, a Mid-Island District Plan was adopted by council, and the remaining districts are the areas that are outside of our planned developments, or what the district plans will focus on. The project will involve the preparation of 7 district area plans that will make recommendations for land use, zoning, connectivity, and other policy initiatives that could take place to improve the districts. The implementation of those will be heavily tied to the LMO project, the capital improvements program, and some other policy initiatives. For both of our projects, we have a town council workshop that's been scheduled for September, where we will bring those forward, and that will be followed by public engagement on the district's project as well, engagement with the Gullah Geechee Task Force, the Planning Commission, and the Housing Action Committee. We will have stakeholder interviews as well as public surveys as a follow-up to help refine the draft plans and the final recommendations that are included in those. So we look forward to your input and your engagement in that process. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Yes, sir.
Will these workshops include us, or will this task force have separate meetings to discuss these items?
Well, I'm in the same stage as Alexis relative to the engagement plan. We're working through outlining that process now. We are sending out updates to the Planning Commission and other committees for when this workshop will occur with Town Council. So I would suggest that's the first meeting to plan to watch or attend for that kickoff, which will then feed into the Planning Commission and these other committees for engagement. So we'll have more to come at your next meeting with specifics on those opportunities.
Yeah, if I can add on to that, I would earmark September 16th. That's a Monday. The workshop will be that day. And we'll go over the priority amendments in detail, which is good to know just what is coming in front of the LMO overhaul. We'll go over the LMO overhaul schedule. We're not going to get into as much detail in the overhaul in that workshop. And then districts will also be discussed at that workshop as well. So I think it will be a longer workshop, but please attend at least virtually if you can, because that's going to be really the first, I think, public-facing viewing workshop of this work.
Yes, sir. Simmons, I think, you have the floor.
Thank you, ladies, for your work. The task force, I know, had several recommendations coming for LMO changes.
Yep.
Actually, I think quite a few of them. So can you tell me how many of those, or how many of those have been considered, for the changes that you're going through?
Yep, so great question. One of our priority amendments does address family compounds and family subdivisions, which will be in front of the LMO overhaul. And then the entire family compound and family subdivision process will be reconsidered and re-reviewed during the overhaul phase. And currently, we're in our zoning district review. Right now, it's the high-level review of what's working in our zoning districts, what needs to change, what could be improved, what's best practice, right? Like, our consultant is working with us for what works for Hilton Head. So everything is on the table and being considered right now. We are not bringing anything forward at the moment currently, not till the workshop.
Lee?
First, I apologize for being late to
Okay,
your ceremony.
turn your mic on.
I wanted to ask, did I speak of a potential timeline that the districts and the LMO project will be complete? Are we there yet? Do we have any projections as to when those, redistricting will be in place?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead with
Yeah,
districts?
yeah. The goal is to have the district project nearing completion, at least accepted drafts of each of the district plans in order to help inform the LMO overhaul project. So you'll see us working really diligently from this point moving forward in order to take those out to the community. At that point, we will need to incorporate the feedback that we receive from the community as well as from council and anticipate that we would begin working through adoption early Q1 next year in advance of when the LMO project would be aligning with the districts.
I think of these initiatives as three big projects happening at one time. So the priority amendments, which are a handful of text changes to the LMO, will be coming through very similarly to districts kind of throughout this winter to be adopted and approved in January, February. That's our projection based on going to public meetings, then going to town council, first reading, second reading. So priority amendments is like number one, districts is number two. Not that they're in any sort of like priority of importance, but those two are happening in a very similar time frame. And then the LMO overhaul follows those, as Shay said, as the third project. And that is more so this spring, and it'll go to adoption most likely next fall, because we're going to have a big public engagement once we have our arms around really the draft of the text changes and where we're going with. Probably right around being August now. Yeah, I'd say August, September next year is the adoption period. Yes.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I guess my concern is always the work that the task force has done, and I would imagine the family compound and the family subdivision are major portions of that, but there will also some relative element changes, setbacks, buffers, and those things that directly affect, opportunities in the historic neighborhoods. So as a question, is those kinds of changes are also being gone through in the rewrite?
In the rewrite, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know we spend quite a bit of time,
Yes.
on those particular items because they so very much affect, the historic neighborhoods when we are attempting to do residential stuff or whatever. So just want to ask that question about those particular items as well.
Yep. Great question.
And so we'll have opportunity to have input on those items, right?
Yes. Yes.
Like I say, sometimes they're odd pieces and a little challenging to figure out.
Yes. Yeah, the LMO overhaul project is broken up into modules. This first module looks at 3 or 4 chapters of the LMO, and in those chapters lives a lot of your design standards and use standards, like the setbacks and buffers you mentioned. So in the upcoming months, we'll be diving into all of that again and resurfacing all of the great work that was done. And the consultant and the team, we're going to have that engagement schedule that includes every board, and then also if we need particular stakeholder committees. So.
And not to be redundant, but this is also part of the discussion about density and those types of things too.
Yes, all of those things.
Because those, as Mr. Simmons said, questions I know we had with some of our Gullah neighborhoods. And our properties a lot of times are very unique and may not fall into the cookie cutter, traditional way of looking at it. So I guess we just all want to make sure that staff is looking at it with a particular eye. Certainly from our perspective, I know you work with other groups too, but we're all anxious and excited about being able to have some input and making sure that the work that we've done in the task force, as Mr. Simmons said, is being remembered.
And heard, yep.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I can also echo that that work has been included in the district's project as well. Although it's not as firm as the LMO, we're feeding recommendations into the LMO. So just as we did with the Mid-Island, we're looking at the historic neighborhoods and the presence of those neighborhoods as part of the districts and integral to the recommendations of those plans. So you will have the opportunity for feedback, not only with the LMO project, but with districts as well. And that information has been fed through to our consultant for LMO, and they're very aware of past work. The goal being only improvements would be made to any of those existing LMO.
And can you remind us who the consulting company is, the firm that we've engaged?
So for my project, it is Code Studio. They're the main lead consultant for the code rewrite. And then
Well, for us, it's staff.
it's
so-
staff. Yeah, for districts, it's pretty much staff. Yeah.
Staff.
Yeah, internal staff project.
Other questions? All right, sorry. Any more questions from my colleagues? Anyone in the public have questions on this particular item? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, ladies, for your
Thank you
work.
Thank you
very
very
much.
much, and we
Okay.
look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll have a staff report on the Historic Neighborhood Permitting and Design Studio by Ms. Sharonica Gavin. Yay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Uh,
Sharonica Gavin, Principal Planner for Historic Neighborhoods. Alrighty, so this has been my first month kind of leading on our Historic Neighborhoods Permitting and Design Studio, and it has been great thus far. I will tell you all just some updates regarding advertisement for the Permitting and Design Studio. We have had some local television coverage just to kind of promote this program, as well as some print material to ensure as when we are in the community, we can share the message of what this program provides, as well as in the town hall's lobby. Most of our staff members have been providing me with citizens who walk through the door just to kind of make sure that they can touch bases with me and I can help as much as possible. So far, so good. So the reporting term for the Historic Neighborhood Permitting and Design Studio is from October 2021 into July of 2024. There has been a total of 86 requests for this program, with 65 of those completed. There are 16 that still remain active, so I do have communication with them, 8 of which are on hold. I do want to just touch bases on the on hold. That is not the town having their projects or their requests on hold. It's them as the applicant themselves. There are 8 that are currently in progress, active, could be under review, or me personally working with those applicants. One thing I do stress to individuals who come in with requests is that we're going to talk on a week-to-week basis as much as they need me. However, if there's anything that they are requesting from us, they will not wait any longer than 5 business days. That's my promise. We have 5 that have been withdrawn and or inactive at this time.
So, one question. How long do we hold an application before we deem it inactive?
If we are having continuous communication, then I am going to leave them open. Some of them just feel like this is not the time to move forward. The ones that have been withdrawn and or inactive, I was not a part of, so I don't know that time frame. However, I can look back through that spreadsheet and provide you with a valid answer.
So we're checking them constantly, see if they're still engaged or if they want to withdraw or whatever.
That's one of my biggest promises. I don't care if it's a quick phone call or a quick email to them, just to kind of see where they stand. Maybe they have new questions, so that even if I can't answer them, I can find the answer for them. Yeah. I have worked closely also with Low Country Gullah and the Heritage Library in order to kind of assist with some of these design studios. We do come across some heirs property, so I just always ensure that we're providing them with the correct and accurate information so that they can move on with the correct stuff.
Other questions at this time? Yours is not working either?
My question is, if it's
Different this
on or inactive, do they start over, or how do they, can they become active again just from their information being already in the process?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things for this program is ensuring that we are eliminating those roadblocks for those who utilize the program. So if it was kind of inactive, I can pick up exactly on the documents where the last communication stood, and we can get that back into an active status.
Thank you.
Sharona, thank you once again for your work. I know that a lot of the projects that I've had opportunity to at least talk about or hear about, some of the projects have been more than the limit of money that they can apply for any one time. So have you found a way to have a contingency, or they reapply, or how do you handle that? Because I know some of these projects that I've heard about have been involved with, $15,000 usually, which I think is still the minimum award.
Yeah,
Or
I think you're
maximum
referencing
award.
home safety repair.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Well, home safety repair, yes. The amount of funding awarded to each applicant is $15,000.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. All right, and I guess all of your design studio applications may not necessarily be home safety repair, so maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself
all right.
on that. But these projects I know are varied otherwise, so I just thought, just to be a bit ahead of myself, I thought I would ask that.
Okay, absolutely.
I was looking at your numbers. It says 86 total design studio requests, 65 completed cases. Now, I would like to know this. From the last time, the Gullah Geechee land, we met to now. Are there any new applicants?
Absolutely. I have seen an average of about like 2 new cases that try to come up. Some of them are kind of like Ms. Green spoke of, where they may have been like in a different status. However, I'll go ahead and just open them back up. But there is about an average of about 2 a month.
Two
And
a
they,
month?
sorry, about
Okay.
2 a month. And for the most of them, just to be transparent, they are not an open and shut case for the most of them. They take time. When I first started back in March, we had some cases that I believe started in April. Some of those are the ones that you currently still see in progress.
And so for the ones that are active that you're working with, if you come up with a plan or a design, and if it's something that they don't like, they have the opportunity to come back and
Absolutely.
rework it or ask the question again.
Yes, they sure can. Conceptual site design is one of the key features of the program. Those are the majority of some of the applications that I have seen. We always work with them. One of my goals is to always provide at least 3 different plans for them, and they can determine which one they like. However, giving them those digital assets so that they can reference them in the end. Because some of the projects don't just, they're not ready to move forward. However, they want an idea of what they can truly do with their land.
Now, your 8 that's on hold, why are they? Now, your 8 that's on hold, why are they there?
They will be on hold based on the applicant themselves. However, we keep them kind of in an active state. However, they are just determining how they would like to move forward.
Okay.
Because oftentimes, some of the cases kind of referencing conceptual site design, this isn't one individual. This is a family. This is multiple individuals trying to figure out exactly how they want to move forward.
Other questions?
Just to get myself back on track, back into. I know lots of times in some of these applications, they require a street name, require a street name in the street, and I did it go? There we go. I know some of the applications do require a street name or renaming of a street, and I suggested to one family they got a street name that didn't represent a family member and I guess some of the older members of the family could have used the name of the family versus a random name that they use. And I suggested to the one family, why didn't you use your grandfather's name or something like that to keep the names in our community alive? So that was one suggestion I wanted to bring. When you come to these street names, you know, they come with names that are from somewhere else in the world, when, you know, there are family members surrounding most of our neighborhoods where a family member's name, you know, whatever the name may be, you know, that they could use one of the elders from the neighborhood to, and that's very unique because most of our neighborhoods, you're not gonna find those names anywhere else. So as a matter of street names, you know, consider the ancestors, keep some of the neighborhoods alive with the people that lived in those areas.
Absolutely, I agree. So addressing is another portion of the historic neighborhood permitting and design studio. They do have the option of determining what they want to name the roads. However, I will definitely keep that in mind, especially as I talk to the family.
Yeah, and the thought sometimes got lost about that because there still seem to be quite a bit of steps to even getting, for example, a mobile home placement is still one of the more feasible way for families to provide, you know, decent living for themselves. And that process seems to still be quite a few steps. And I know during that process, most of the time, there's been a lot of time there's been a renaming of a street or a naming of a street. So just want to throw that out.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of my, when I meet with the families in our initial intake meeting, I do ensure, once they determine exactly what they want to do, what they're looking to do, I provide them with pretty much a layout of what is this process going to look like. I don't want them to be blindsided down the road. I want them to have just upfront knowledge of what's to come. So,
Right.
as you stated, oftentimes, some of them do need addressing and street naming. So ensuring that they know that upfront and with realistic timeframes. Because I don't want anyone coming through the door and thinking we're going to turn this around within 30 days. That may not be realistic. So I try to ensure that information up front.
May I ask a question? I know you know at this position for yourself, but with the potential of increased densities for some of the Gullah properties, is that something that you're having in your mind when you sit down and talk to someone about designing a property? And perhaps you could suggest that once the increase of density is provided, that will open more opportunities for the utilization of that same parcel. So is that something that you would put on the table as well as a part of the conversation?
Absolutely. Just to pay, respect to the privacy of the individuals who utilize the program, I don't want to say too much. However, oftentimes individuals do come in and maybe they have a parcel that is large enough for multiple homes on their site. And maybe they only want to place one. One thing I do make sure they know is what the possibility of what can truly be there, and keeping in mind what could happen with an increased density or changes to density here within the town. I will ensure that all of them are aware of that as well.
Other questions for Ms. Gavin? Anyone in the public have a question on this design studio? Ms. Wright, you okay? Oh, she said her communication connection is a little sketchy, so hope we don't lose her, but I just want to try to remember that you're here with us, so. Yeah,
I'm still here. It's just the sound is going in and out.
yeah, okay, all right. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you, Ms. Gavin, for your good work, and it's good to see you in front of us. You well.
Thanks.
The next item is the Home and Safety Repair Program, and it is Sharonica Gavin.
It is. It is. So home safety and repair, the last time we had an opportunity to give you all an update, the program was going through a complete restructure. This is something that I had the opportunity to lead on and had some key players within the town staff who kind of assisted and helped as much as possible. With this restructure, we have identified key individuals to ensure that the program's processes move forward without any delays. One of the biggest things were just admin and reporting, keeping everything all together, as well as communication. That was one of the biggest things when I came onto the town. Individuals were calling daily, asking, where do I stand in this process? I would like all of you all to know every individual who has been approved for this program and is currently, maybe they're one of the 63 awaiting town visits, they have been informed of a scheduled date for us to come out there and see them. Outside of having key individuals in admin and communication, such as myself, we also have a clear inspections team and a contract review team to ensure that everything just constantly works on a decent cycle and nothing is becoming delayed. So with the reporting for the Home Safety and Repair Program, reporting was from July 2022 to July of 2024. To date, we have received about 140 applications. With these applications, we are seeing on average maybe about one a month, which is quite interesting. We have about 105 that have been completed. And right now, we have 38 that have been 105 completed applications have been received. We have 38 that have been completed. We have 4 that are currently permitted jobs that are under contract, and then we have 63 that are currently awaiting town visits. To date, I will tell you, we have already, just because the reporting is a little ahead of the date of our meetings, we have already initiated some of those town site visits. So we're getting back in those homes, and we're utilizing this new process that we have put in place a month back. And it's been flowing well. One thing our team is doing and ensuring that we stay on top of, if something is not working, we are changing it to ensure that we are properly serving our homeowners as well as our contractors and our town staff here to keep everything moving and in flow.
Questions from Ms. Gavin? Sir, Mr. Hintz.
Can you remind us, again, you told us last meeting, so I apologize, but can you remind us the source of these fundings?
Yes, these are actually ARPA funds. And the biggest thing, in May, we were awarded about $899,000, and that's an approximate. And some of that funding was provided to Home Safety Repair. The other was provided to the Lateral Sewer Connection Program. The thing about the funding that has been provided at this time for the Home Safety and Repair Program is that it doesn't go too far. We are going to be able to address about 60 to 65 homeowners through this program. But please keep in mind, there have been homeowners, applicants who have applied for this program who have been waiting. So they're in that 63 that we can address.
Other questions for Ms. Gavin? Anyone in our public have a question about this program?
All right. I'll share a little bit about sewer connection. That program is, we're utilizing the restructure as well. We do have an admin who's overseeing the sewer connection program. She's serving as the lead. However, I am still that individual as the citizens liaison to ensure that whenever they're looking to apply or have questions, they can always reference me at any given time.
Very good. Anyone else have questions? It's been that time of the year where I know a lot of people are out of place, and hopefully staff has had some time to kind of breathe a little bit. So we appreciate your good work, and I know you still get your feet on the ground. So
Absolutely.
thank you for your reporting.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have a discussion item. I'm sorry, let me go to Mr. Boxley with CDC. He has maybe an update or a report for us. I know he wasn't, I'm kind of putting him on the spot, but every time he walks in the room, I want to hear what he has to say.
Good afternoon. Well, thank you for providing an opportunity, Chairman,
Yes, sir.
for a bit of an update. I'll be very brief. It's kind of timely what I'd like to update you on, given the nature of Mr. Hollis's presentation today regarding FEMA. I just wanted to provide a bit of an update regarding the town's efforts thus far. The Emergency Operations Command was activated this morning at 6 a.m. As a result of the impending storm. Wanted to make sure and update you all on where we stand with that and some of the efforts that we have been taking on. And we'd like to encourage the general public to make sure that that the general public is prepared and is, storm ready. So make sure that everybody has a plan in place for should they need to evacuate, or making sure that before the flooding gets too extreme over the next few days, which is anticipated based on the amount of rain that is being predicted to fall, that people have enough water for 5 days, enough non-perishable food items for 5 days, as well as making sure that, should they need to evacuate, that they're monitoring trusted sources of information for updates. Trusted sources of information being, your local news channels, or even tapping into the town's website. You can follow us on Facebook as well for accurate information, as well as the county's website for updates regarding the storm situation. There is one shelter that is opening today over in Jasper County, I want to say, the location is 250 Jaguar Trail in Ridgeland in Jasper County, and that will be open at 4 p.m. today in case individuals are in need of shelter. But we also want to encourage everyone to, if you can stay home and stay safe. As we know, with a significant amount of rainfall like this and the ground gets saturated, there's the potential for downed trees. And so we want to make sure that people are staying safe, staying off the roads and out of harm's way. Another piece that I would update the task force on is that through the CDC, last month, we began began a series of seminars for lending, small business and real estate lending, in partnership with TD Bank. And it's the first in a 5-part series that will take place monthly. Our next session is on August the 13th. All of our sessions will be hosted at the Island Rec Center, so we're proud of that partnership as well. But we wanted to begin to connect the business community, the Gullah business community here, with the possible lending institution, and the first of which is a relationship that we're building with TD Bank. So if you need any further information on that, please reach out to me. Thank you for being there, Mr. Campbell, in attendance. And please inform the general public as we work to connect people to financial resources as well.
I'm excited about that. That's the piece that I've been waiting for.
Yes, sir.
So when people come to the design studio, wherever they come, and they want to start a project, what I've observed is that one of the stumbling blocks is that we don't have the resources to do even some of the pre-planning stuff that has to go in there. So is that type of relationship with the financial institution going to be something that they can use those types of funds with, or is it tied only to the real estate?
No, I think that there will be a broad utilization for the funds, the funding sources, and the different streams that the financial institutions are open to providing, whether that is, real estate programs for first-time home buyers, whether that is investment properties, whether that is even for, lines of credit for small businesses. The next session, if I'm not mistaken, the next session is about day-to-day business operations. So they're covering a broad range of topics for the business community. And yeah, so I think that there are several opportunities out there.
That was held on Thursday?
It was, let me see, it was on a, no, I think it was a Thursday. I think it was a Thursday. I know this next session is on the 13th. I think that's a Tuesday, and it seems like the remaining of them. I'll get you a copy of the flyer though before we all leave here
Yeah,
today.
I think I saw that. Reason I think it was a Thursday because I know I was not available. It's not the best day for me,
Yeah.
but was it well attended?
It was well attended. We had for the first session, we had about 20 members of the community out participating. It was actually a rainy day, so we were glad to have that level of participation. But I think that it'll grow. We're actually marketing it through our communications department, Facebook and social media, et cetera. So I think that we'll continue to grow it as we move forward.
People in the design studio are applicants, they know about it, right?
Yes, we definitely have been working through, and Sharonica was in attendance, Ms. Gavin was in attendance to make sure that she's aware of what we're doing. And she and I have been tag teaming a lot of these things and, meeting with different members of the community. And, I've been receiving some calls that I've referred to her related to Design Studio as well. So we're building a wonderful working relationship.
That's great. That's great. Other questions for Mr. Bosley? Yes.
Mr. Bosley, thank you for your work, sir.
My pleasure.
My question would be regarding grants and potential grant writing kind of information for potential borrowers, or not borrowers, but grantees.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any thought in your progression to include grants and grant writing in your work?
Specifically, are you asking specifically grant writing as a means by which the CDC raises funds, or grants for community members?
Community members.
Okay, great question. And yes, short answer is yes. We have more information coming on that later in the year, but we do have a small business lending and real estate development program that we're working on, and it's more along the lines of a lending program than it is a grant program. And the reason why we're operating it as such is because we want to make sure that we have a revenue stream that's sustainable, because what we don't want to do is eventually run out of funds through the CDC, so that we'll be continually able to support businesses as they grow and develop and matriculate through a process and a cycle.
Okay. But I mean, I guess when I'm sitting there, I'm thinking that if I took out a loan to develop my business, right?
Right.
And there was also an avenue where I can get a grant, receive a grant, and grant could potentially allow me to pay off my loan to you.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to see if there's a way that we can kind of bring those two together in a way that benefits, both parties.
Absolutely. Yeah. So looking at means by which we can support businesses, especially in those startup phases, we're definitely looking at ways that we can do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Very quick. Anyone in the public?
One quick question. The partnership with TD Bank, and you mentioned having a steady stream of money. I mean, have you all discussed what they'll be willing to fund? How much, I guess the question is how much they'll be willing to fund, or is it based on per applicant that may come to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have not gotten that far down the road with funding availability, funding limits, et cetera. My goal through the program with TD Bank was, because they are a national brand, that they would, that they would have access to a higher level of resources than some of our, local community-based banks. And I wanted to start at that level to begin to possibly have a higher funding stream. but I'm also looking at some of the local lenders as well. But the short answer is, I do not have a funding ceiling or floor established with them at this particular point.
Also, conventional lending tools in most banks have also been, quite a big hurdle for a lot of small businesses.
Right.
Conventional lending can have requirements.
Right.
So I think if they, start to speak with them and try to get around some of the conventional lending requirements, that's going to be a big hurdle as well. Everybody's not going to have a 3 or 4 year financial statement or an audited statement or, these kind of things that a lot of the conventional lending processes require.
Right.
So if they're gonna, try to assist, they're gonna have to be able to be flexible from the conventional lending practices.
I think that we are on a good pathway for that, and you're right. Traditionally, lending practices, especially financial institutions, large financial institutions, have been exclusionary, especially when it comes to, to African American businesses. Historically, this is true. What we did discuss, and the presenter from TD Bank even mentioned this in our last session, was, that now that they have some flexibility and are open to looking at, new means by which to determine credit worthiness. That could be, an individual that has been leasing for a year, and that, their landlord is open to, providing documentation of, that individual's payment history, as well as even, taking bills into consideration that an individual has made payments on as part of that credit build, if you will. So I think short answer is, I do believe that we're in a different space. And those are the conversations that I'm having at the regional level with TD Bank as well. There was a gentleman present from the Greenville office of TD Bank that's in the regional office there related to community reinvestment. And so he and I were having some offline conversations about that as well. So I think that we're in a good space, short answer.
Right, and I was just about to mention to, the banks have had to sort of adhere to that Community Reinvestment Act. I think that's still a valid option for banks, that requirement is actually still out there. Would also open doors for small lenders, small borrowers, or small businesses.
Right.
Community Reinvestment Act was one of those things that has passed some time ago that a lot of banks still have not adhered to in their practices. So it just has another point for small businesses to look into, or banks to use a tool that they already have in place.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
So this will hopefully help some of the other institutions that you're in touch with follow.
Oh yeah, I've already had some conversations with some other lending institutions, and I'm kind of looking forward to creating a similar series of seminars in the beginning of 2025. So be on the lookout for that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Any other questions before I release him? I want to try to move the agenda. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Impromptu, and we appreciate your good work.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is a discussion item, hurricane preparation for Gullah communities. We have a presentation from Meldon Hollis, previous Federal Emergency Management Agency Associate. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm going to see if I can get this to work.
Yeah, we have it here, but it's not on the.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Meldon Hollis. I sit on the board of the Gullah Museum, Hilton Head. And of course, the Gullah Museum has as its main purpose the preservation of Gullah culture. and history on this island. So to that degree, we share the same objective. I'm going to talk this morning about climate change and its threat to Gullah communities, not just here, but along the Atlantic seaboard. I am not representing FEMA. I want to make that clear. I no longer work for the federal government. But for the last 5 years of my active professional life, I was a professor who taught emergency management in the emergency management program at Savannah State College, at a university. As a matter of fact, I had something to do with establishing that program. And until a year ago, I taught at the Emergency Management Institute, which is FEMA's training academy for emergency managers. And the last 6 months, I have made a presentation on the impact of climate change on African American communities at a national conference in Washington, D.C. And I made a presentation on the impact of climate change on Gullah communities at the Emergency Management Institute. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was commissioned to do a study to take a look at why the Gullah do not evacuate. There's some interesting findings in that, and at least at EMI, they're taking a look at that and using that as training material. My own family goes back to about 1740 in South Carolina, in St. Philip's Parish, north of Charleston. Since that family worked in the rice paddies of the rice plantations around McClellanville and at the Hampton plantation. You can find the names of some of my ancestors on the wall, and they have at the Hampton plantation where they list the names of the enslaved people who worked there. Looking at the issue of threats to Gullah communities, there are 3 of them which I have worked on, identified, and written about, but one of them I want to talk to you about today. One of those is aging demographics, the fact that the Gullah community, as communities, seems to be growing older. The younger people are finding economic opportunity outside of their communities, and as they become more educated and well-trained, since the economic opportunities do not seem to be available to them in their own communities, they are doing what African Americans have done traditionally, which is move to other places for economic opportunity. So the communities that I work with, I find that I'm working with an aging demographic, and unless there's some replenishment of that community, the culture is beginning to shrink because so many young people are leaving. Migration and displacement due to what is called economic development, those pressures on the communities. The irony here is as Gullah Geechee culture becomes more popular, there are pressures that are causing that population to dwindle. And so economic development is pushing, as it is called, works in opposition to tourism attraction. There's the tourism attraction, but at the same time, the forces that would sustain the Gullah community, the development seems to be pushing the communities into smaller and smaller enclaves. I want to talk to you about climate change. And I will start with the fact, the 3 things I want to leave you with is the increased and present and anticipated climate activity in this area with its distinct impact on the Gullah community, significant changes in federal disaster policy which need to be communicated to the Gullah community, specific to the Gullah community. Policy changes have been made specifically to address the needs and the interests of Gullah communities. And finally, the availability of assistance to faith-based and community-based organizations. That is, it is probably not well known that to the degree churches and local community-based organizations get involved in providing support for recovery. Those are reimbursable expenses, and those organizations we want to encourage to get involved. The first panel I want to show you, probably people who are not in this business did not show a whole bunch of, make a big note of this study that came out in 2020. There are 3,142 counties in the United States, and because of what we can do with data now, those people who study natural disasters have pulled together various characteristics, put them together, and then produced a study on the vulnerability of communities to natural disasters. As I said before, there's 3,142 counties. And so this information was put together by way of counties. I want you to take a look at line 1, because line 1 is the county that was found to be most susceptible to natural disasters in the United States. That's Beaufort County. Colleton County is listed as number 4. I stopped at number 12 because that's where I live, Jasper County. But I am sure that the vulnerability that you see for Jasper County and Colleton County is because they're located next to Beaufort County. So I hope we have your attention. This is not my opinion. This is a study that is available to you online. It's been published in 2020, but it suggests that over the next 10 to 20 years, the county that is most susceptible to natural disasters is Beaufort County, South Carolina. The reason I wanted to speak to you is because the information that I've come into at the various conferences that I've worked at. Being an ex-emergency manager is kind of like being an old firefighter. You may be sitting at the table, but when you hear the siren go by, you sort of want to get up and go to the door. I've been doing this for a while, and so one of the things that I do, even now, because I still am active enough to be invited to conferences and make presentations, is to take a look at what the weather looks like. Those who know me know that they get a note from me 4 or 5 days before the hurricane starts. They get a note from me about the wind and the weather and to take this down and take this out of your yard. I started in my neighborhood an emergency management organization that is in charge of looking at our neighborhood and making sure our neighborhood is safe. And I recently made a presentation at our Hurricane Expo in Jasper County, and it pulls together all of the responders and invites all of the new neighbors here who moved here from Ohio and Wisconsin and New Jersey to talk about what really happens when hurricanes take place. If you will take a look at the panel above you, everybody who is in this business, the emergency management business, thinks this is going to be a year like none that you have seen in the past. And if I tell you Beryl came to us 2 months early, it started as a 5 and landed in Houston as a 1, but it left people without electricity for 5 or 6 days. That's not a fun thing in Houston, especially when the heat index is 105 and 106. I have relatives who I talked to, and they did not have kind things to say about the impact of Beryl. Now, Beryl started as a 5 2 months early, but 2 months earlier than we've ever seen a Category 5 come out of the Caribbean. And they are still working on recovering from the flooding in the Houston area. If you will see named storms this year, Colorado State University, and they work with NOAA and one other, the National Hurricane Center. Normally, we would see 14 named storms. This year, it is predicted we will see 25. One of them was named Debbie, started as a named storm. It came ashore in Florida this morning as a Category 1. It will arrive here in 2 days, and the expected rainfall will be somewhere between 12 inches and 30 inches. That is a 1,000-year event. Those of you who remember the last 1,000-year rain event, remember there were sections of Highway 95 that were underwater. sections of 17 that are underwater. And for those folks who have flooding problems, that is water that comes up to the edge of their yard when you get 5 or 6 inches, I'm telling you, you need to buckle in for what you're about to experience over the next 4 or 5 days. It is expected that the rain clouds will hang over this area for 3 to 4 days. We won't see the end of this until Thursday. More importantly, I want you to take a look at the hurricane list. It is predicted that we will have 12 hurricanes this year. Normally there are about 7, but then let's go down to major hurricanes. We're looking at 6, normally there are about 3. Based on what our prognosticators are telling us, you can expect 2 major hurricanes along the Atlantic coast. And when I say major hurricanes, I'm talking about a category 3 or above. What we're going to be going through over the next 3 days is not even a hurricane, it's a tropical storm. And so it's milder than what you can expect to happen over the rest of this period. The reason, really, that I want to talk to you is because what the Gullah community needs to know is that there has been a major change in federal policy with respect to disaster response. One of the things that I wrestled with while I worked for FEMA was the fact that there were different rates of recovery after a hurricane. Minority communities seem to recover more slowly and less well than other segments of the communities where disasters took place. We have now documented that the more money FEMA pumped into a disaster area, the larger the wealth gap between Black and white communities grew. That is, the Black community actually lost money while the white community gained in wealth as a result of the process, the federal process. Faced with this community, FEMA first came back with, we do not discriminate on a racial basis. But guess what was at the base of this? What was at the base of this was something that seemed to make a lot of sense. After Katrina, and I did work on the Katrina task force, there was so much fraud in the real estate, 5 and 6 people claiming the same building, coming in and filing documents saying this is my place or this is my place, or renting it, saying that they needed a trailer, and when the trailer came in, they would put it in the yard and rent it to somebody else. When we went to Congress to talk about how much money we'd spend, Congress said, you're gonna have to do better than this. You're gonna have to ask people for a deed or a will or something before you start handing them out money. And so after Katrina, it became FEMA policy that in order to be eligible for FEMA assistance for recovery, you had to produce a deed or will. And so I'm sure you understand what the impact was. For at least a third of the African American community in the South, of course, property was transferred informally, and so there was no deed, there was no will, and so 1/3 of the African American community was not eligible for FEMA support. Now, FEMA has changed that policy. They changed it in September of 2001. It became effective in August of 2001. If you can show that you're paying the tax bill on that property, or you can show that you live there, and the way you prove it is by showing if improvements were made, you paid for those improvements, or if you can get a government official to verify in a letter that you in fact live there and responsible for the upkeep, you will be eligible for the FEMA resources. Now, that's $42,500 to most folks in terms of moving toward making their homes habitable, but it is worth millions. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars now that people can actually go in and claim eligibility. FEMA response to natural and man-made disasters, there is a problem. You can see hurricanes, but right now, one of the things that's not listed there, but now needs to be listed, is heat. At the last conference I went to in Washington, D.C., It was pretty warm, and we were talking to the deputy of EPA, and she said, "You think this is warm, gentlemen? I want you to know that this is the coolest summer you're going to see over the next 10 years. It only gets hotter from here. It doesn't get cooler." And when we take a look at what the heat impact is going to be, it has a clear impact on areas like this, particularly for people who have to work in the outside. But more than that, this is happening at the same time electricity costs will be going up. And for those people who are burdened with high costs of electricity, that's something that we really need to take a look at. It's good. Heat is something. Also, one of the things that is not talked about but needs to be considered is, given the amount of rain and the amount of moisture that you will see, ground level water is beginning to rise. That has a significant impact on people who, it has a significant impact on people who rely on septic tanks. You can expect a lot of pressure on septic tanks and sewage systems throughout this area. There will be an increased cost of flood insurance and home insurance. There will be lost days to heat. So those are things I wanted to bring to your attention and you should be thinking about. I want to spend a minute talking about FEMA and how FEMA operates. Having told you that I no longer work for FEMA, I do just want to talk about how it works, because people think that once there's a storm, FEMA shows up and you just apply for a benefit and you get your money. That's not the way it works. There's something called the Stafford Act. FEMA cannot enter a state unless the governor declares an emergency, and then the governor reports to the regional director and provides the documentation that there are expenses that exceed the normal expenses in the state. The president then can declare a major disaster. Once he does that, the federal government becomes responsible for a minimum of 75% of the recovery cost. The programs that get kicked into action are called individual assistance, public assistance, and a mitigation program. The individual assistance means that an individual can go online or can go into an operations center and apply for benefits, and eligibility will be determined, and depending on what you're eligible for, up to $42,500 can be provided. FEMA does not put you in the position you were in, but it puts you in the position to go back to work and to make your home habitable. And there are some instances in which the $42,000 or up to $42,000 is awarded over and above your insurance. FEMA is really responsible for your uninsured damages. If you're uninsured, that's one thing, but if you're underinsured, the new policy at FEMA, the old policy was, let's just say $42,500 was the amount that you were eligible for. If the insurance company gave you $42,500, FEMA would give you nothing. They would say you're covered. But now the change is, if there's excess damage over and above your insured damage, you can still participate up to that $42,500, and that's a significant change. Yes, sir.
Yes, before you got too far away from that, I saw also too, can you talk a little bit about the process? You said that they don't have to document whether it's heirs property or if it's ownership or?
On heirs property. There has been a specific change in that. Let me just see if I do go into it a little bit more. Panels. Okay, I'll talk about it here. When there was damage to the house, if the house became uninhabitable, or if there was damage and you were looking for reimbursement for some of the damages, in the past, you would have to provide to FEMA proof of ownership, because people are renters sometimes, and if you're a renter, you're not eligible for the money to repair somebody else's house. Some people get that mixed up. They are eligible for damage to their personal property, but not to the home that belongs to somebody else. So you had to provide to FEMA documentation showing that you own the house, you had a deed to the house, or that it was yours by inheritance as an heir. You had to have an insurable interest, basically. Now, and because it became clear that was excluding black people who lived and was responsible for property. They have basically just changed that policy. If you can, as I said before, if you can come in and show that you live there, if you pay taxes on the place, if you have made major improvements to the place, or you can get someone to document the fact that you have lived there over a certain period of time and you're responsible for it, then FEMA will accept that as documentation, and you will be eligible for the same benefits that a property owner would be entitled to if they brought the deed to the house. That should not be mistaken for the renter having a right to be paid for damages to someone else's property. But if the renter has damage to personal property, they are eligible for reimbursement and support. And did I answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, I just wanted you to kind of reemphasize that.
And I just want to talk about some of the reforms that FEMA has made. They've established a new program. The problem with emergency management policy in the past has been the person sitting there writing that policy is typically a person who has a college degree and has a credit card in their back pocket. And so they can say to you, what you need to do is set aside enough food for 3 or 4 days, get in the car, drive to a hotel, plop down your credit card, and we'll be there in a month and we'll get you reimbursed. Well, the people who are writing those policies need to stand in line at Walmart just before a hurricane, and they'll find out that they're not 3 or 4 days worth of non-perishable foods in the pantry, and particularly if that hurricane is coming toward the end of the month, there's hardly anything in the pantry. So there are people without credit cards and without debit cards and can't plop them down at the local hotel. So when I did my first study on why the Gullah do not evacuate, I remember asking a lady who's a little older than I am why she didn't evacuate. She said, "Son, where am I gonna go?" And I thought about that for a minute, and I did not have an answer. As a matter of fact, until last year, Beaufort County did not have a government-sponsored place for you to evacuate to. They've just entered into a contract with Jasper County so that you now have a place to evacuate to. And so the assumption that you have a car that's working and working order, all you gotta do is load folks up and drive up to the hotel. Now, I do know, because I've been here for at least one hurricane, that in the second day of the hurricane warning, everything between here and Tennessee is rented. And you can't just jump in the car and drive. Well, this new program that FEMA has put in place, establishing serious needs assistance, if you can establish accurately your residence, you can, and your state participates in this program, FEMA will just send you $750 to get you started. Now that gets past a barrier that folks have had in the past. There's something else called establishing displacement assistance. The way this works is if you can establish the fact that your house is not habitable, and FEMA has ways of checking on it once you give them the details of where you live, or that your utilities have been out over a certain period of time, you are eligible for FEMA. What FEMA will do in most cases is they will pull up a screen and say, okay, this is where you live. I'm going to give you a list of hotels that we have agreements with. How many rooms do you need? If you get there, they will have a voucher. And they will be paid for the time that you are in the hotel. One of the reasons people had problems applying for these benefits, is there time pressure? I just need to know. Time pressure. Can I go on through this?
I think you're fine.
When people did their loan applications in the past, one of the things that happened with the FEMA application was you got something that said you have to apply to the business administration and for a loan. And people would look at this and say, not only do I not want a loan, I can't afford a loan, and I don't know why I'm going through this. That requirement has been eliminated. You no longer have to apply to SBA before you're eligible for a loan. The underinsured survivors, as I said before, one of the things that's happening now is that if you are underinsured, once you've been paid for your insurance, the home is still uninhabitable or there's still needs, you can still dip into that 42.5 that's available. Entrepreneurs, so one of the issues that has arisen more recently is many people are working from home. And so there's a difficulty in separating out what is a business expense and what is a home expense. Now FEMA will take a look at replacing the computer or whatever it is that's in the house and take it as, so that you can do the home business expense. Expanding the habitability criteria, this is important. If you had problems with your homes, there's a hole in the roof before the storm, and the inspector showed up and the inspector said, you know, it looks like that hole was there before the storm. We can't do anything about that. The criteria now is whatever is necessary to make the home habitable. It doesn't matter when the damage was done, it can be included in the reimbursement or the compensation. Accessibility improvements, if you have a handicap that can be recognized or documented, and in order to make the house more habitable, as you do your repairs, you want to add maybe you need to add a ramp, or you need to widen the door or something like that. That can be worked into the application and will be taken care of. I worked in one of these centers that took these calls, so I'm speaking a little bit from experience. We asked people for documentation. People say, what do you want documentation? My house is underwater. And I will not have the documents until, as a matter of fact, the documents may have washed away, so it's going to take a little time to put it together. That has always been a problem for late applications. The FEMA's website says now they are removing those barriers. How they are removing it, I don't know because I don't work there anymore. But I have gone through some important improvements in the way that FEMA now operates. They've improved their website. And let's see, they've improved their website. They say they're making it easier. In the end, I want to make a distinction between individual assistance, public assistance, and mitigation. There's 3 different programs that FEMA runs. The individual assistance, of course, is what you and your family are eligible for, and you go directly to FEMA. Public assistance is the library, the road, the courthouse. If damage was done there, then the government specifically applies to FEMA for reimbursement. And that's not something on an individual basis. And finally, there's something called mitigation. FEMA also gives grants to towns, counties. If you can point to a vulnerability and you say, our bridge was damaged, but we can find a way to improve the strength of that bridge, or if we can put in some improvements that would limit the damage of flooding in this area. That's mitigation, and FEMA also has grants that the county can apply for or the town can apply for that has to do with mitigation, which is preventing. It looks like if we spend some money on it now, it'll save us money in the long term. Then that kind of support is available. The last point, well, the last of 2 points that I want to make is that the Department of Homeland Security has a faith-based and neighborhood partnerships office. And the purpose of that office is to work directly with faith-based organizations and community-based organizations to help them become part of a disaster recovery network. If those organizations, for instance, are keeping food, are providing shelter, or even educational programs, then this office works directly with those organizations to make sure they are reimbursed and to help them understand how they can work with the community to speed up recovery. The head of the organization, the head of that particular office, Marcus Coleman, is someone who I've known now for about 15 years. And I've thought about asking Marcus to come to this area to speak to the church, to speak to our religious community. It has been suggested to me that if we want to do that, we should hold a meeting in Wilmington, in Charleston, in Savannah, or Jacksonville. I have contacted the head of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce to see if we can go ahead and put that together. But that office has an 8-hour program for those faith-based community or faith-based or community organizations that are interested in knowing how to be more involved and to get involved in that effort. This is just a sheet on how to apply for FEMA assistance. Actually, you can have a FEMA app if you want to on your phone, but you can apply by phone, by person, by mail, or by fax. I can tell you that most people pick up the phone and call and they get their account set up, and that's how and then they work with someone on the end of that phone for their assistance. I have not spoken to what is the biggest issue, I think, in the Gullah community and the emergency management. The biggest issue I found was the absence of culturally appropriate communications. And what I mean by that is, how do you actually get the information to people who need it? I'm not talking about the head of organizations. I'm talking about people who do not trust the government and who do not trust the government for a reason. And there will, first of all, there's a communications network that they're not part of. They're not watching CNN on a regular basis. And you can show up, and it doesn't matter the color of your skin, I will tell you now. But if you say, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help you, that's the end of the conversation as far as they're concerned. And so the information has to be culturally appropriate and has to come to the community through those persons who they trust. And that is a problem. I have many scars on my back from trying to explain that to FEMA. FEMA has now pretty much moved toward understanding that. And I will tell you that as a result of some of the efforts that we had, the head of Region 4 designated a person specifically in Atlanta whose responsibility is to respond to any particular issues that I raise or others raise that have to do with the Gullah community. I last spoke to her last week, and I want you to know that if we can identify issues specific to the Gullah community that we would like to have addressed, at least we have someone we can call who is in the office of the regional administrator who will help us marshal resources and who's anxious to be helpful if at all possible. So that is my presentation. If there are any questions I might ask, I'll go ahead and take those questions. Otherwise, I'll sit down.
Questions for Mr. Hollis? Yes, Mr. Hintz?
That it was an excellent presentation
Thank you.
and wonderful source of resources. What would, knowing that, we have, we're here for the Gullah Geechee community, what would your advice be for us and our staff to be better prepared on the communication aspect if and when we have a disaster?
There are a couple of things that occur to me. One is you, like most towns and counties, will have somebody who is responsible for floodplain management. And I can tell you that this year is going to be a hell of a year for folks who are located in floodplains. I'll say to you now, if you saw the water come up to the edge of your yard last year, you're going to see it come up to your door and into the house this year, unless there have been improvements. This is not funny, but I was talking to someone who works for FEMA who lives in this area, and we now have maps that you can enter data into, and we'll be able to predict how close the water will come to your house within 30 feet. Okay, so we have those maps in place. And I was discussing just this morning with someone who said, I'm just going to tell you, we're looking for 12 to 30 inches, and that is a 1,000-year event. And she got off the phone. I tried to call her back later, and she didn't answer the phone. And when she finally come back, I said, I tried to get you back. She says, I was out in the yard clearing some things and digging some ditches because I want this water to run through my yard into my neighbor's yard. If I gave you all the name, you'd know who I'm talking about. But she went out to make sure that when this flooding starts over the next couple of days, it's not going to end up in her house. It's going to she's digging trenches to make sure it runs on through her yard, but some people are going to be facing that. I'm sorry. And so one of the issues that is important is you've got the communities identified. One of the things that I would hope one could do is to sit down with your floodplain manager to see the degree to which the floodplain levels are important in your community, because I can tell you flooding is going to be a big, big issue this year. And you can put together a mitigation grant. There are two places where you can go to get the money. The town can get the money. Both, one is an EPA, where there's an environmental justice group that looks at where the impact is on low income or quote vulnerable communities. They have a grant there. They also have those grants at FEMA if you have a long-term plan for addressing the particular problems. And just as an aside, within the Gullah community, one of the issues has been private roads. The roads that come off the main road, but it's private property, and in the past, FEMA would not support that because that's private property, or they couldn't determine who's responsible for it. The new guidelines suggest that even if addressing the roads, the private property roads, if it is something that needs to be addressed to make the house habitable or accessible, they will look at that and reimbursement would be available, which I think is a big improvement. And I'm just going to tell you, all of this came out of conversations with FEMA saying your policies are good, but they're not addressing a segment of the community that really needs your support. And you're trying to do the right thing, and then they got an executive order from this president saying you're supposed to focus on vulnerable communities. And so we've made some real progress in that area. Did I answer? But one of the issues is you got to look at your floodplain management. And to the degree that people are going to be vulnerable to sea rise, that needs to be part of the conversation so people are making intelligent decisions. And I'll tell you why that's a problem. One of the things that you will hear in Gullah communities is you need to hold on to the land. You need to keep the land. You need to keep the land in the family. I say that is an honorable objective. However, it needs to be put in the context of whether or not climate change is going to make significant changes to the environment. That goes to crabbing, that goes to fishing, that goes to whether or not your yard is going to disappear over the next 5 to 10 years. And that needs to be part of the conversation. People need to be informed of what the possible implications are going forward, so that when they make these decisions, they're making them with the full amount of information that's available, and that information is available to your floodplain manager and to folks who want to do the research. We can take you to websites, as I said before, that can look at the floodplains and tell you where the water is going to rise, what its impacts is going to be. One of the problems that we identified, or at least I've identified when I look at this, is when towns apply for funds to mitigate flood damage or other damages. What they're looking at is, when I say historical, they're looking at downtown, they're looking at the plantations, they're looking at the high cost real estate. They're really not trying to take a look at what mitigation is necessary for low income communities. And that is something I hope a group like you would be able to address. Take a look at these communities, specifically the Gullah communities, to see what the impact will be on them, so that there's a voice in this mitigation planning and application process that goes directly to that issue, not just talking about what I would call, I'll give you an example. I've looked at an application out of Beaufort, and they're all talking about that historical area along the main street in Beaufort, and nothing whatsoever about what's going on St. Helens Island, where that's where the real damage is. And so people have this idea that when you're talking about historical preservation or mitigation, that you're talking about the high-cost real estate instead of the real estate where Gullah folks are located. And so that's my sentiment about that. But on the other thing, the most important thing is, how do you and others who have an interest in the Gullah community shape an instrument that communicates to the Gullah community so that when this information is available, it goes where it can be used? There are a number of issues you have to get around. Someone from FEMA once told me, well, we'll put it on telephones and then they can just pull it up. And I'm saying, I don't know a 76-year-old who's going to go to the phone to find this information. We need to find a way to make sure that information will get into that house. It's isolated. One of the most effective ways I know is the churches and the community-based organizations that actually know who lives where. The other thing that I learned in my research is you got to get the grandmothers in a room. I'll tell you something that's very interesting. When I was trying to find out why people don't evacuate, the answer came down to, if grandma's not going, I'm not going. Rather than leave grandma, people all went to grandma's house and stayed there during the storm. And so we've got to influence grandmothers. We've got to influence the folks who actually make the decisions in the community, and we've got to reach out to them. There are opportunities, I think, to get people into the churches, or to get them to a community-based meeting, to get them to a school in the afternoon, to say we have information that's very important about flooding, about septic tanks, about these other things that are going to affect you. And then the information has to be put out to them by people who they trust and who are authentic communicators in their community. I will not give you specific names of people. You have to figure that out for yourself. But unless and until we do that, this very important information will continue to go around the places where it's most needed.
Sir, you have a question as well?
This is awfully, a lot of good information. Thank you, Mr. Hollis. But, it's important that you say that, the people who won't leave, in our community say, if grandma's not going, I'm not leaving. But there have been a lot of people who have stayed during previous storms. And I think if you somehow find those people who stayed, you'll have a much easier time to visit people that need to leave.
Right.
So, but history tells us, people are going to stay because they feel they're going to protect the land of themselves by being here to see what happens, which is, as you know, probably the worst mistake you could ever make.
Right.
But in this community, there have been people who have stayed, who won't want to stay again, and no doubt the churches is still the grassroots for our community. And we have other organizations that are now taking a stronghold, like Sister Louise in the back. The Gullah Museum, which you say you're part of as well, who are taking a very strong hold in our community, can still be the voice, the source of information. And no doubt, trust is still a major factor in all of this. Right. We talk about that almost on a regular basis, whether it comes from the town or it comes from FEMA. Trust is no doubt going to be a key ingredient in getting people the information and who's bringing that information. So thank you for a lot of good information.
If I like to make 2 points. Well, I thought I was going to make 2 points. Those 2 points got away from me. But what you were saying stimulated. I hope it comes back to me. Well, if I remember it, I'll send an email.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Hollis, I'm sorry. You have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. This one, my question would be, from your history, what is the turnaround time that FEMA pretty much responds to a to a, an applicant or a person who in need? That's one question. The second question, with the rise in flood insurance costs to individuals, is there any talk about FEMA funds being available to assist homeowners with providing or helping to pay for flood insurance?
Thank you for raising two issues. One is, one of the grants that's available is if low-income communities want to come together with a joint policy that protects the whole community, and that brings down the cost, FEMA will subsidize the formation of that kind of community-based flood insurance grant. The other thing that I should just say, because it's on my mind, is home insurance does not cover water damage, okay? And what FEMA has done recently, and I guess people would say it's appropriate, is it has stopped a flat assessment for everybody across the country, because people in Montana are saying, why the hell am I paying for seaborne flood insurance or water surge, but that's got nothing to do with me. And now they've begun to use a model that pushes the expense to where the danger is. And one of the things that you will know now, or you will find now, is, and if you don't know, in Florida, it costs as much for the insurance as it does for the mortgage. And that is pushing the expense to where the danger and the exposure is, and that is increasingly going to become a burden on people who live on the shore. The price, the risk is going to, the price is going to be allocated more along risk lines, and for low income folks who are living on that prime property along the water, the insurance costs are going to become unbearable very soon, if it's not already unbearable.
So part of the question, I think you said, was how long it takes
Oh,
to
yes,
respond if someone has an application.
After the disaster, well, the two things. A president can allocate $5 million to a state before the disaster arrives, and then the state can use that however they want to use it. They normally use that to get the National Guard and other folks organized. But in order to be eligible for funding from FEMA, first of all, as I said before, the governor has to apply for the presidential declaration. That is normally, it can be done, let me just put it this way. If the state and the federal government are working together, you know something's going to happen 3 or 4 days before it happens, then you can get that, the state can process that application and get it to Washington in a day, and you can get a dedication the next day. Now, if some people are not very active in getting and putting that formulation together, it may take 4 or 5 days before FEMA declares the national, the disaster. Once that is declared, when you get on the phone, you're eligible, okay? And depending on whether or not you're working with the owner program, other needs assessment, that $750 is available at the end of the interview on the phone. This is a new approach. Now, I worked Katrina, and some people did not have a bank account to send the money to. That's one of the things you had to deal with, and folks wanted you to send it by check, and they couldn't go home, so it wasn't even their mailing address. And I entertained many a call where somebody said, I went and got my check, and somebody held me up before I could get across the street. I said, ma'am, there's nothing I can do about that. But as soon as you get on the phone and you're verified over the phone, your address is verified, the funds can start flowing immediately. But you're talking about a process that takes at minimum a week, because you've got 3 or 4 days before the declaration. And then what will pop up on the FEMA website is these counties, and this is something important. The declaration is by county, it's not by state, okay? So that you can declare Beaufort County as having a disaster and not declare Jasper County, and somebody in Jasper County has just as much damage and is looking across the street, but because that county does not qualify, there's no support coming to that county. You got to be in a county where the declaration is taking place. Beaufort County, the entire county is an island, and so when you get your evacuation orders, it normally applies to the entire county. There are no exceptions. And so the entire county is expected to evacuate. Of course, it doesn't, but because the Gullah have lived on these sea islands for 300 years, they have developed their own senses, their own defensive mechanisms, and they have a great deal of confidence in those mechanisms. And there are people who just cannot travel. That's the other thing. Either because they don't have cars, because they have medical problems. And our community and the Gullah community has developed mechanisms for dealing with that. And for some, so they feel fairly comfortable in many cases and don't evacuate. But one of the things that I want to make clear is that because of the past history of their not being eligible, there is an attitude in the Gullah community of why should I even bother? FEMA doesn't really pay anybody, and that would have been true over the last 10 or 12 years. And one of the things that we have to undercut is to make people understand now that what was true for the last 10 or 12 years is no longer true. You are now eligible for these benefits, and you should take advantage of them. And that's the difficulty, finding the mechanisms for communicating that to a community that has in the past not been eligible and has some distrust for messengers.
Mr. Hollis, that's a lot of good information and there's a lot of good work. We really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for taking the
No other
time.
questions for Mr. Hollis?
No questions?
Anyone in the public?
Oh, there is a
The
public.
public is 3 people, so.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hollis. Anyone here would like to make a public comment that's on the non-agenda items? Mr. Barnwell? Yes, sir.
Good evening to each of you who have given up your valuable time to volunteer to do all this fantastic work for the community. Thank to each of the staff persons who spend extra time preparing to give such fantastic reports to you. Thanks to the town council, as well as all the other committees. And special thanks to Mr. Hollis, Professor, Doctor, for such a fantastic, interesting report at such a necessary moment. My name is Thomas Barnwell Jr. I live at I have property, at 36 Benway Drive, is one of the reasons I'm standing here. I live at 51 Katie Miller Drive on Hilton Head, have been here for only 89 years. And the reason I'm standing here is to thank you for all the hard work that you are doing and you still plan to do in the future. Now, Mr. Hollis just gave us and the general public a very eye-opening, meaningful report. And I would like to ask each of you, as a member of this fantastic group, I've already thanked you for your work, but I'd like to ask you, how much of the budget of the town have this group asked the town to make sure that this year's budget, as well as next year's budget, will be addressing drainage. Drainage in every community that each of you represent. Please. Now, the staff give a fantastic report of all the things that are going on. And I'm not a meteorologist, I'm not close to that area, but they're predicting heavy rain water to come to the area in the next few days. And I know that in the past year and a half, there's been some drainage on the island. Even this week, off Squire Pope Road, there's been some drainage done by the county. Off Marshland Road, where there are new developments, there's been some drainage in that area. But we have many areas in Grasslawn, in Spanish Well, Squire Pope, Chaplain. We've had no drainage in those areas for many years. I'm asking you, please, among all of you, try to raise this question, because the staff can work on many neighborhood design project in the design studio. That's a fantastic program. All these programs are great. But the design studio is not going to be able to help the Gullah community if they don't have drainage. And I ask you, please, look into that for the benefit of the total minority Native community residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Barnwell. The point is well taken. I'm sure Ms. Gavin is making some good notes on that particular item that I know has been very near and dear to the heart of Mr. Barnwell and so many others, not just Mr. Barnwell, but that is an issue that we've heard, and we've certainly developed it from this task force and asked that question again. So I'm just asking Ms. Gavin to make note of that, and I would like to have a conversation about maybe some strategy or what the town is doing. And so when we have that question, we can have a better answer for our constituents. I believe that Ms. Louise had her hand up first. Dr. Hollis, if you don't mind.
Well, good evening, everybody. I am Louise Miller Cohen, and I really just got up here to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the town of Hilton Head Island for seeing the necessity in the community. Thank all of you who are a part of the Gullah Geechee Land and Cultural Preservation Task Force. Thank you for your time, and thank you for what you have done over the years. You haven't just got started, but over the years. And I just want you all to know that you're doing a great job. And I want to thank you so very much for that. Thank you to Mr. Barnwell for coming up and saying all that he said. I don't have to echo what he said, because it is so necessary that we have this service in our community. I am one of those people who are affected by drainage. And at the Gullah Museum site, where water, and I think there was mentioned during Mr. Hollis's presentation, where the water was drained from one neighbor over on the other, that happened to me, where the water from Chinaberry actually was draining over on the Gullah Museum site and causing that site to flood. So there is a great need for drainage on Hilton Head Island, and especially in our neighborhood, some of us who are affected by it. But again, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for allowing the people at home to be able to watch if they're not here, they can see what's going on. I was home dressed for the meeting and skeptical about coming out because I didn't know whether this meeting was canceled or not. But I went online, I couldn't see that it was canceled. So anyway, when the meeting, when it actually came on, I saw Mr. Barnwell sitting here. And I said, well, Tom is there. I was dressed, okay? So I said, my granddaughter said, you gonna go? I said, well, yeah. I said, Tom is out there. They didn't show the sign. I said, but yeah, Tom is out there. He's by himself. Yeah, I'm gonna go. But thank you so very, very much for making things possible. The design studio, all these needs that we have in the community, I thank you so very much for addressing that, all of you. I'm not gonna start calling names because then y'all will say, oh, Ms. Cohen called that name and didn't say. So, but thank you so very much. And thank you to Mr. Hollis for traveling all this way to bring all this good information to us. And I just want to say thank you to all of us because we will be able to pass this information on to where it's needed in the churches and otherwise. We can point people in the direction where they need to go. So keep on doing what you're doing. It's work, I know it is, because I'm working too, okay? Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Yes, sir.
This comment doesn't have anything to do with emergency management. I work with Dr. Cohen at the museum, and there was a conversation this morning about the LMO. I'd like to ask you to take a look at a particular issue. The LMO addresses commercial and addresses residential. At our site, we're trying to basically do historical restoration. And to that degree, we're looking at Gullah artifacts and Gullah buildings that would have been built on this island before there was electricity or before there was plumbing. And we're finding that as we're trying to make decisions on how to replicate and do historical restoration, you can't find direction for historical restoration in the LMO. You can find residential, you can find commercial. Our position is that we're neither residential and we're not commercial. We think there ought to be some place in the LMO where you address historical restoration, cultural and educational institutions, because we believe there's a different set of considerations to put together. Now that doesn't mean that we want to build without ramps so that people can get into their homes, but the considerations that you look at when you're trying to be historically accurate bump up against some of the new regulations. Those regulations were in fact put in place to get rid of buildings like the ones that we're trying to put together. So we're asking those folks who are at this point looking at the LMO to think about what one does or how one regulates cultural, educational, and historical organizations that are not meant for people's residence and are not meant as commercial activities. So thank you. If you give that some attention, it'd be very helpful to us.
Great comment, Mr. Hollis. Thank you so much for just saying that for the record. And again, I know staff is paying attention. So this is definitely the right time to speak up as we go through these district and LMO rewrite and planning. So we'll keep that in front of us. Okay, anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
regarding Mr. Barnwell's request, would it be appropriate for us to submit a letter from us to town council specifically requesting, what that budget number could potentially be for drainage for our neighborhoods? In support of what the staff is gonna do.
Yeah, I want to have a conversation with Ms. Gavin first, and we can talk about the strategy or the approach.
Okay.
And I think it also, I've always liked to know exactly what it is we're talking about. So if there's some data that exists or some specific information, most of us know the areas where the flooding is. But I'm thinking that hopefully the town does too. And we need to see where they are with recognizing that,
Yeah,
and
yes,
then
sir.
addressing those areas, see how much money is applied to it. But I'd like to start that conversation through Ms.
And
Gavin.
again, I'm not
Yes, sir.
trying to circumvent what
Yes,
Mrs.
sir.
Gavin's gonna do. I'm just suggesting that perhaps if there was a position that we took as a, you know, as a sitting board, then it will enhance her position when she goes and make those inquiries.
Yes. Thank you for that.
I think to that point, the town does have a current drainage plan.
Okay, I'm
So
good,
I
good.
think we,
We'll see where we are.
yeah, if we piggyback on that, then
Yes.
we'll know exactly what
Yeah.
we need to inquire about. But
Yeah,
there is one, like you said.
Like I said, I'd like to be educated so I can ask an educated question, so. Okay. If there is nothing further from my colleagues, I want to thank you all for taking your time. As so many have said, we actually had a full house today with, of course, Joyce Wright joining us virtually. And just to echo what's already been said to the staff, to Ms. Gavin, it's good to see you making a presentation today. And we continue to support the work that you're doing. And I would like to get together and have lunch or breakfast and have a conversation about quite a few of these items, okay? All right. And if there is nothing further, I will entertain a motion to be adjourned.
So,
We are finding ourselves adjourned. Thank you so much to our public, as always. God bless you. Stay safe out there. Have a good day.